Information fueled,
opinion driven. This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
8:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on in. Just getting some audio from Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz from Minnesota, governor from Minnesota. Now, he is widely, and we've got Jonathan Fahey, who's going to join us in a second. But one of the things that Walz is credited with, they say, is coming up with this whole soundbite and this whole accusation that J.D. Vance and the Republicans are weird. This is, and by the way, as you listen to this, realize that one of the primary jobs of a running mate is to be the attack dog. This is what Tim Walz has to say about Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and the weird Republicans.
Well, look, you're seeing that. And this observation of weird came from people I know, my friends, my relatives, Republicans. Some of them that this is just awkward. They're awkward. And it stems from who's asking for this crazy stuff? Who's asking to raise the price of insulin? Who's asking to get rid of birth control? They do these focus groups or whatever. Who's sitting in a bar in Racine, Wisconsin saying, we really need to ban Animal Farm? Nobody is.
He is just lying. I mean, I've listened to this guy for like 20 seconds and I've already counted like 3 or 4 lies, Jonathan Fahey. So clearly, this guy, as I listened to him on MSNBC, I know 2 things about him after about 4 minutes of listening to various audio bites. Number 1, he is going to be an attack dog for Kamala Harris. That's number 1. Number 2, he's clearly not against lying because a lot of the things that he's saying are either complete fabrications or you're not really telling the entire story of where Donald Trump stands on the issues.
yeah, exactly. Like that clip, I hadn't heard that before, but utter nonsense. This idea that Donald Trump wants higher prices for insulin. I've never heard that a single time. I don't think that's his position. And the Democrats, it's so funny, they take credit for this bill, which I think was in the works before Donald Trump was trying to push that. But just incidentally, we probably spent $1 trillion to get $35 insulin, so it didn't really, it was not really $35. But putting that aside, yeah, I think he is going to be the attack dog. He probably makes her comfortable. He's comfortable lying, and that weird attack that they're so proud of, it really just shows us deep cynicism of the Democratic Party, because they think people like J.D. Vance, people sort of working class Americans, people that pull themselves up and make something out of their lives, they think that's weird, and they want to marginalize those people, and they attack them relentlessly. And, they just have such disdain for middle America, and that just shows, just really the elitism of it. But I do think he probably makes her comfortable. Apparently they hit it off, whatever the interview process, to the extent that she even had a role in picking him. And, so I do think it's kind of an interesting pick. It's certainly going to the, tacking quite left, because I think a lot of people on the Republican side were a lot more concerned about Josh Shapiro or Mark Kelly. I don't think this is really scaring anybody on the Republican side. I think it's really a sigh of relief that Pennsylvania is now far more in play than it would have been if Josh Shapiro was nominated.
Do you think, as we get to know Tim Walz, and I've got a couple of other audio pieces that I want to play, one of the things that I find interesting is that he has the audacity to call Donald Trump and J.D. Vance awkward. Does he know who he's running with? Kamala Harris is one of the most awkward people ever in politics. I mean, whether it's the things that she says or that laugh, and then we could go down the fact that there's no policy issues at all on her website as to how she would run the country. There's a lot of awkward with Kamala Harris. And so it's obvious what this guy's role is. I want to play a couple more sound bites real quick.
They're talking about real things. So when these guys get in situations in front of real people and trying to pretend like they know what people are going through, they've got nothing to offer. And no one can picture them in their own lives. I brought this thing up that Donald Trump tries to mock Vice President Harris for laughing, and I made the point, you never see this guy laugh. You never see him do these normal things. Imagine when I go home at night, I pick up the Frisbee and throw it, and my dog catches it, he comes over, he gets the belly rub for being a good boy.
Yeah, he's out there saying, Donald Trump doesn't lead a normal life like Kamala Harris does. First of all, if I was a millionaire like Donald Trump, I don't know how normal life I would lead. But here's the deal. Trump is out there with people across America, talking to them, engaging with them as well. I don't know, man, first blush, and I know that I'm a conservative, and so I'm like pre-programmed to hate Tim Walz. I don't like him already.
Yeah, it's so funny that they're, going down that road, because the one thing you really can't say about Donald Trump is that he can't relate to people. He relates to everybody. You see him at Chick-fil-A, you see him at sporting events, you see him at all of these things, and he interacts with people as well as anyone that I've ever seen. There's no awkwardness about it. He could talk to, the Queen of England and the guy that's, washing the car and have it the same type of conversation, because he's authentic and he's always the same. It's just so funny with Kamala Harris. It's like she couldn't even order ice cream 2 weeks ago without acting utterly foolish. And I don't know if you remember that, I think it was Vox, they had an article that talked about how she had to do like a rehearsal for a dinner at this guy, David Bradley, who's a big DC, big shot in DC, to practice how to hold a glass of wine and how to interact at a dinner. It's so pathetic that she cannot, she can't do anything. I've never seen her in an unscripted situation where she's not utterly foolish. She laughs inappropriately. They had to hire child actors. Remember when she was talking to kids about the wonders of space travel? They had to have actors, and the actors looked unimpressed by her. I mean, it was so bad that she talks to everyone like they're either in kindergarten or that she has some deep understanding that they don't have, and it's just all silliness. But again, it's a classic Democrat projection move. That's like they always talk about all the things that are their problems. They have the most awkward, unrelatable candidate that's probably ever run for president, who, in fact, as we all know, and your audience knows, no one's ever voted for her. That's how bad she is. They had to install her with this sort of cabal against Joe Biden, in the dark of the night. I think she got nominated last night. It's like they have somebody that can't relate to anyone. And another sort of other point on this just shows how beholden they are to the far left of their party, which I think Kamala Harris is the far left of the party, but they're going to be governing to please the people in power, not the American people. Donald Trump, whatever you say about him, he was an organic candidate. He wasn't installed by anyone. He came out of nowhere in 2016. I mean, he was famous, but he had to navigate through the whole pack of very qualified Republicans to get the nomination to begin with. So, it's a totally, who's going to really look out for the American people? The person that's gone after them, earned their votes, or somebody that's been installed by, George Clooney and a few, Democrat, power brokers.
Jonathan Fahey joining us here on Super Talk 99.7. I want to play one more audio bite from the governor for the state of Minnesota, Tim Walz. He is Kamala Harris's running mate. Just trying to get a sense of who he is.
Yeah, he's terrifying. He is going to strip reproductive rights.
Talking about, by the way, he's talking about Donald Trump.
He is going to weaponize the federal government. He is going to take power. He is going to put the world at risk by pulling it out of alliances. But I think when you have these big things, and I would argue it's with climate change and homelessness, if it's an aspirational or a big thing that becomes too scary, people don't know what they can personally do about it, and it gives him a power that he doesn't deserve. This guy's done nothing. He's accomplished nothing. He's never served in the military. He's never been successful at business.
He's never been successful at business? I mean, admittedly, he's never been in the military, but, I mean, to say that Donald Trump hasn't ever been successful at business is obviously just a lie, and to say that he's never done anything when the reality is Donald Trump had pretty good 4 years in office. And so for this guy, I think, to be honest, Jonathan, I think the three audio bites that we've played of Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, kind of tells us all we need to know about him. I mean, he's going to lie. He's very liberal, and he's going to be, I think, obviously an attack dog against Donald Trump. The question is, how effective will it be if the line of attack is clearly lies?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does seem like, he's somebody that can at least go out on TV, which everyone now acknowledges Kamala Harris can't be put in front of a reporter or even somebody that's favorable. But I think it'll wear thin. And once you start looking at his record, what's the biggest, probably one of the top two issues is immigration right now in the country for the voters. And he's in favor of sanctuary cities. And we know sanctuary cities are one of the Democrats' contributing factors to Lake and Riley being murdered. So you do think he's in favor of sanctuary cities, which means we're going to continue with this open borders policy, and Kamala Harris is for it as well. So open borders continue, sanctuary cities continue. We continue to be at greater risk, both public safety and national security. And the other thing that was interesting, he was a governor during all those George Floyd riots that now the Democrats try to act like never happened in 2020,
right.
The peaceful protested. But even the really liberal beta mayor of Minneapolis was criticizing him for not being supportive of sending the National Guard in, so it's like, and that guy was about as submissive to the far left as anyone could possibly be. And he even criticized him. So he's even farther left than that guy on the riots when that was politically beneficial for the Democrats to have those riots because they wanted people to be unhappy, insecure, other things that would help defeat an incumbent. So it is interesting. Like, he seems to be far left. He'll say anything. He's not going to have a record that it might be acceptable in some states, but most people don't want open borders, and they don't want, rioters dictating our police policy. And, that's what he and Kamala Harris will bring to us because, as I'm sure remember, she supported that quote-unquote bail fund, which was really just for people to riot. Yeah, and the whole purpose of that was, hey, riot all you want, we got your back, and let's cause as much disruption as possible. And everyone knows that's what it was.
Minnesota Freedom Fund.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, the people that got released on that and went on to commit some horrible crimes. And, of course, the mainstream media doesn't cover that. But that was the biggest story, I believe, in 2020, COVID and the BLM riots. And it's almost like neither one of them happened,
right.
Because they both, in hindsight, they were profoundly wrong on both, or at least in the eyes of the American people. So, but I think it will be interesting because they decided to tack left. And I don't know if it's some exuberance. They think Kamala Harris is doing so well they could go left, or are they unsure of their left-wing base, with all these other issues that they had to pick him because, I think the anti-Semitism problem in the Democratic Party is real, and that might be the underlying reason that, Josh Shapiro didn't get picked. They can't say that, but it seems like that's at least, an undercurrent in all of this. Could
have been, because, it was right down to the wire. Supposedly, even last night, she didn't know if she was going to pick Walz or Shapiro. And maybe she did hear from the far left of her base, including someone like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and some of these folks. And Ilhan Omar, of course, she represents part of Minnesota. So, maybe this is one of those demands that the squad had, which is we don't want Shapiro, which would make more sense because Harris needs Pennsylvania. Instead, she picked the far left governor from the state of Minnesota. I don't know, and I also don't know what different he brings to the Harris campaign because I don't know if he can be as left as she is because that's pretty far left, but it seems to me like he's right there. So there's no way that she can sit here and say that she's a moderate, which is what the media and her surrogates are trying to say, is that she's a moderate. She no longer believes the things that she has said, 4 years ago. She supposedly doesn't believe that. So I think this really does play into the fact that she is still very liberal because she picked a liberal running mate.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so much for balancing the ticket, too. You think you would want to, if she's far left, you'd want to go somebody more centrist. So, but it does show where this Democratic Party is. Like, they are so far out of the mainstream. And Kamala Harris, putting the polls aside, if you go issue by issue, she is far outside of the mainstream. And that's, just based on voting record and statements she's made. So, do they think they could win on a far left candidacy? Because at least with Joe Biden, he governed far left and seemed to march to whatever, drum they beat for him. But it does seem like he at least ran as a moderate, and he had somewhat of a moderate track record. It seems like the Democratic Party, if these two get elected, it's going to be no holds barred. I mean, the border will be open. The only push will be citizenship for everyone here illegally. They're going to be as anti-police as any administration. Hard to believe with the current one, but even more so. And we're going to be weak around the world. I can't imagine, can you imagine Putin sitting at a table across from Kamala Harris? She can't play the little games that she plays. I'm speaking, Mr. President, or any of these little power moves that work in the United States, or accuse them of being misgendering or mischaracterizing her. Those little tricks work in the American bubble of the media and stuff like that. But on the international stage, they're going to laugh at her because she's so profoundly unserious, and everyone knows that. I mean, look at like 4 years. I don't recall, I might be wrong, but I don't recall ever seeing her give anything that resembles a press conference. I don't recall her ever going on the Sunday shows. The only interviews she does are like The View or these other like softball interviews. Yeah. And I recall that, that Lester Holt interview when she was supposedly still the border czar, when she absolutely got flattened by Lester Holt, which is about as easy of an interview as you can have with mainstream media. He's setting her up to look good, and she looked like a fool. So, it's amazing to me that, look at every administration. The vice president would be somebody that would be out there on Sunday shows when something breaks in Ukraine and the Middle East. They'd be out there advocating for their policy. And this administration currently has so little respect for her. They just give her childish assignments like, oh, the world's falling apart. Why don't you get ice cream at Tyra Banks' new ice cream shop? It's that pathetic. But it is, the polls have been favorable for her recently, which is surprising. But I think it's a bump that once people get to know her, they're going to not like her, just the way when she ran for president, the Democrats started liking her, and at the end, no one liked her.
That's exactly right. Jonathan Fahey, is always great to have you on. Thanks for coming on at the last minute. And I agree. There was one reporter for the Associated Press who is saying that it's her opinion that the protective bubble of the media around Kamala Harris is about to burst. And I think one of the reasons why is because the media, I think they're probably at this point starting to feel used because she's not giving them anything. Kamala Harris is not giving them anything to report.